What's up, guys? Welcome to Daily Dose of Reddit. This is your host, Zach, and today's subreddit is r/EntitledParents. This story's called Entitled Mother Decides That She Makes the Rules. Drunk Bros Prove Her Wrong. This story happened a few years ago. For context, I met my girlfriend online and found out that while we did live in the same country, we unfortunately lived a minimum of 6 hours apart. Not the worst situation out there, but not exactly ideal either because of the regular travel and long hours. Us both being broke as hell, the only way we'd ever get to see each other is if one of us jumped on some sort of public transport and stomached the journey. But due to the aforementioned brokenness, we would often have to take a budget coach company, as while this did increase the amount of travel time substantially, it was sometimes upwards of 1/10 of the price of taking a train. If you've never taken public transport, I would not recommend it, as it seems to be a breeding ground for all sorts of strange, annoying, or invasive behavior. I also have a bunch of other stories because of this. This is further compounded by people ignoring polite etiquette all the time. I'm not sure what it's like in other countries, but in mine, England, everybody silently agrees that nobody wants to be on public transport, so everyone is usually happy to just leave each other alone in absolute silence. This goes doubly so if the transport is at night because people are trying to sleep. This story was, in fact, on a late night coach. So imagine the situation. People are tired, already uncomfortable, and just want to get where they want to go and not be bothered so things can go as smoothly as possible. Okay, context over. This is where our story begins, and thanks for sticking with me this far. Having just said goodbye to my girlfriend, I got on the coach after being stood waiting in the freezing winter cold for some time for the coach to arrive. About 30 minutes late, another quirk of budget travel. At this point, I was already tired, emotionally and physically drained, and just wanted to get settled in. So I did a quick scan of the seating situation, noticed that it was already pretty full, and flopped into the first empty pair of seats I could find. This company didn't do seat bookings, so it was a free-for-all, and I was quite happy I didn't have to sit next to anyone, at least for the first leg of my journey. I had been sat down for maybe a minute when a hand reached between the seats from behind me and tapped me on the shoulder. This, as you may have guessed, was my first encounter with entitled mom.
Excuse me, what do you think you're doing?
I really had no idea and just wanted to be left alone, so as politely as I could, I said, nothing? Why?
That's a disabled seat, you know.
I honestly hadn't noticed, but she was correct, and I am not disabled, so technically that could have been an issue if a disabled person did come aboard at some point. Oh, I hadn't noticed. Thanks for letting me know.
That's right, you need to move.
I was a little confused because not only was there no disabled person needing the seats, but it wasn't like she wanted them either. She was sitting with her kid in the seats behind, and they had clearly been on the coach for a while, with blankets and food and various other things out that people commonly use on long-distance travel all over them. So they were clearly comfortable. I guess I'll move if someone needs it.
No.
I have no idea why she thought she owned the place and needed to inflict her will on random strangers who weren't following the rules to the letter. But sadly, it worked on me. I was so tired and had already talked to this human way more than I had planned, so I just sighed and moved to another seat. The seat I moved to did have someone next to it, but they were considerate and got off at the next stop anyway, so I got a free double seat about an hour into the journey. I could see the previous seat from the place I moved to and saw entitled mom pull this weird stunt at least 3 more times in the next 2 hours, every time badgering these people until they moved, but still never taking the seat for themselves or anything like that. It was weird. They continued doing this until we got to our third stop, when in walks a group of bros that were clearly just coming home after a pub crawl. They were your loud, stereotypical drunk lads, but to their credit, as soon as the driver told them to keep it down, they did and were as considerate as a group of drunk people can be. They talked a lot, but never in raised voices. They continued drinking, but never bothered anyone, and even cleaned up when one of them spilled something, much to the mocking of the other drunk lads, without being told to do so. The drunk lads, of course, went straight for the empty seats because they wanted to sit together, which, of course, angered the entitled mother for some reason.
You people need to move. That's a disabled seat and you're the 7, mate.
No, mate, we're good. We're pretty paralytic already, so that counts.
For the record, the kid was not being disturbed at all and was already sound asleep and had been for some time. The drunk lads weren't being loud, so they were never going to wake her up. So it just seemed like entitled mother added the extra reason as an excuse to exercise her own agenda.
You boys can't sit there.
She said dismissively. The drunk lads, obviously objecting to her dismissive tone, completely ignored her from that point on, which she was clearly unhappy about. But there really wasn't anything she could do about it, except for continuing to complain, which she did a lot. She even tried to complain to the driver more than once, but he basically told her, in a voice that sounded like he didn't get paid enough for this, that if they aren't being loud, abusive, and aren't stopping a disabled person using the seats, they have every right to sit there. Fast forward a couple of hours now, and entitled mother had continued to complain to the drunken lads the entire time. We stopped so the driver could take a break and so everyone could get out and stretch their legs, etc. The drunken lads took full advantage of this to go out, grab a smoke, and generally reignite their rowdy attitude from the previous night for a few minutes before returning to being quiet and respectful on the coach. For some reason, this seemed to wind entitled mother up even more. Like the very concept of the drunk lads having fun now offended her. Her solution to this was to wake up her sleeping daughter, march her to the front of the coach where the doors are, lean out of the door, and shout at the drunken lads while pointing at her kid.
How dare you act this way? Don't you know there's a child here?
The drunken lads collectively told her to F off and carried on their business until the driver returned, where they put out their cigarettes and quietly got back on the bus, politely pushing past entitled mother and her now cranky kid. The kid must have only been 4, maybe 5, I'm not great at judging age, and as such had really no idea what was happening here. But now that she was awake, she was going to make sure that everyone knew it. I don't blame the kid at all for her behavior over the next hours, because entitled mother made no attempt to stop it, and on occasion, she'd encourage it. Entitled mother would tell her kid to run up to random people just to say hello and not leave until they said hello back. Yes, even if they were sleeping. The kid would talk extremely loudly, and entitled mother wouldn't tell her to keep quiet, but instead would bring her voice up to match her kids. They would even randomly start singing and clapping to church songs out of nowhere ad nauseum. A personal favorite of theirs seemed to be,
I've got the joy, 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 joy down in my heart, down in my heart.
over and over. This was annoying to me, and I wasn't even trying to sleep. I can only imagine what it was like for everyone else. This continued until one of the drunken lads decided it was time something was said with a ton of drunken confidence.
Excuse me, you need to move seats. You disturbed my bros.
How dare you talk to me like that?
She just went off on them for several minutes while they sat there full on laughing in her face the entire time until one of the drunk lads interrupted her.
Right, miss, that's not very helpful. What would Jesus say?
If they were trying to hide their laughter before, they stopped trying, and all of them went into fits of laughter before all drunkenly starting to sing and clap.
I've got the joy, 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 joy down in my heart, down in my heart.
At the entitled mother. Probably realizing she'd lost this one, entitled mother just sank into her seat and endured the mocking for the rest of my time on the coach, which was about an hour. They were clearly winding down and going to stop at one point, but when the kid joined in, they thought that was so funny that they just kept going. I got the feeling that they'd stop when the kid did, and in their drunken state, they were ready to commit. I got off the coach at my stop about an hour later and they were still going. Never mess with lads on a night out. They'll outdo you. This story's called Entitled Mom Bullies Me While Shopping. This one just blew my mind and seriously ticked me off. This happened yesterday. I'll try to type any dialogue to the best of my recollection. I ended up at the grocery store because I realized there were a few necessities I forgot to stock in preparation for my family's self-isolation. Shopping was relatively easy. Though it was fairly busy, people wore masks and kept a wide berth from one another. When I got to the checkout section, I was satisfied because everyone kept about about 6 feet between themselves and others in line. I stepped into line that only had one woman in it. Her purchases were already on the conveyor belt and she was standing down by the cashier about 6 feet in front of me. She had her empty cart behind her, so my shopping cart was pushed up against hers. Brilliant way to force distancing, by the way. Now, in American grocery stores, it's common that the aisle dividers at the end of the conveyor belt extend 3 to 5 feet, so the shops can stock the shelves with impulse items. Since it was at the end of the conveyor belt and the aisle dividers extended, I was essentially trapped. Enter entitled mother, her husband, and their 3-year-old daughter. Entitled mother and her husband step right up behind me. I could practically feel the husband's breath when he spoke. Entitled mother is holding her 3-year-old in her arms. I could reach out and touch them all without fully extending my arms. Whoa, can you please back up? The experts are recommending a distance of 6 feet during this pandemic. Entitled mother with seriously straight up bimbo attitude.
Excuse you, I'm fine right where I am. Why, you think you're some sort of Disney princess that can get people to do what you want if you snap your fingers?
Me flabbergasted. Please back up. You're entirely too close to me.
I ain't sick, princess. Mind your expletive business.
Can you please back up so that I can exit this line? You can have my spot. Entitled mother and her husband back up and allow me to pull my cart out of line. As I'm walking toward the next cashier, I hear entitled mother.
Told you this works.
Now, I got the impression that entitled mother intended to run me out of line because of the statement. It was something conspiratorial in delivery. I could be wrong, of course. Well, when I stepped up to another cashier's line, the cashier I just left began having some sort of system errors. All other lines were 3 or 4 people deep, so lucky me. Entitled mother and her family repeat the same behavior behind me. The entire family is once again within hugging distance. Or perhaps punching distance? Entitled mother smiles smugly. I'm ticked and it bled into my verbiage. You should be ashamed of yourself. You're risking your daughter's health, my health, to prove some point that is entirely lost to me. Do you need to establish dominance? Back up and let me leave this line.
Shut the expletive up. My daughter isn't sick. I take care of my kid.
Your daughter isn't sick yet. You keep playing these stupid games and you'll win stupid prizes, and your daughter may get a participation trophy. I'm moving past her and towards another line. I decide to get into line behind 2 individuals practicing distancing. Entitled mother steps up to the register and loudly begins to complain to the cashier.
You need to kick that woman out of your store. She just told me that she hopes my daughter gets Modelo.
Lady, I don't have the patience for you today. I saw what happened. You were out of line. End of discussion. The woman in line ahead of me starts laughing. I'm smiling like a vindicated idiot.
Are you kidding me? You're out of line. I want to talk to your manager.
Sure, no problem. When you leave, just call the store and we'll get him on the phone for you.
No, I want to talk to him now.
And I want a Hemsworth brother waiting naked in my bed when I get home. Neither of those things are happening. At this point, I've decided I wish I were a man because I am sort of in love with this cashier. He's definitely won me over.
How dare you be so vulgar in front of my daughter?
The same daughter that heard you tell another customer to shut the duck up? The entitled mother was ticked, but she shut her mouth for the remainder of their interaction. I eyed her the whole time, waiting for her to lose her marbles. The husband never spoke to anyone other than entitled mother. She ended up exiting the store before me. Of course, as she exited, she kept promising to call the manager and have the witty cashier's job. As she left, the cashier turned around and gave me the proudest, cheesiest smile and said, "I got your back, sis. I love him." Edited. Other words were exchanged between cashier and entitled mother. However, I only shared what parts of the conversation I felt I remembered correctly, which was the beginning of their interaction. The entitled mother didn't raise her voice anymore, so the rest of it was a bit anticlimactic. This story's called Entitled Parents Let Their Kids Play in Our Cactus Garden. No, this was pre-Modelo virus. My parents have a house in the city and I am home with them due to the pandemic. My house has a very small plot of dirt in the front that is fenced in by a large black iron fence. It's very clear this is private property. My grandmother has a very green thumb and brought some of her outdoor cactus. She lives in Connecticut over to plant in the yard many years ago. They survive every winter and bloom in the summer, and are pretty cool plants. However, their spines and needles are very small and translucent. It is extremely hard to see them, and you can get pricked very easily. I myself have gotten pricked while tidying up the yard, and I obviously try to avoid the plants. The needles are also extremely hard to remove out of your skin. My mom used to always decorate the garden by placing little models of dinosaurs or animals among the cactus. The kids around the neighborhood all loved it, and often when coming home, I would see some family with a young kid looking at the garden. It was cute, and my family had no issues. Until these entitled parents came along. My mom was in the house on a normal day when she heard some loud noises outside that weren't going away. So she looks outside and sees a group of parents with their kids. The parents are standing outside and around the iron fence, while the kids are in the yard, which is almost completely covered in cactus. They are playing with the toy dinosaurs and animals while sitting in the cactus. It's clear the parents assumed the cactus didn't have any needles because they aren't really visible to the human eye. You barely see the needles when they're in your skin. As mom is looking at them, the parents see her and get their kids out of the yard and leave. Those parents are not going to have fun pulling hundreds and hundreds of translucent, tiny, thin needles from their children's arms, legs, and asses. Edit: if you want to see what kind of cactus is in the yard, just Google images of eastern prickly pear cactuses. Edit 2. My parents took out all the dinos to avoid another incident. The parents luckily have not contacted us or attempted to engage in a lawsuit. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell to never miss an episode.